Hey, Mike.
What's your lunch and learn on today?
Perl. Perl.
Okay. Moped.
You gonna join us?
I would like to. I've got to get some.
You can eat and run. I won't be offended.
Well, I can go online.
You could.
Yeah, we're online.
That way I can get stuff done.
That's right.
Listen to you say, thank you.
Anytime you're ready, Brett.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna. Okay. Welcome to another installment of our Perl Study Talks. My name is Brett Estrade, and it's May 3rd, 2018. And we're going to be talking about Perl variables and take more of a gentle approach. So, and we might start off slow, and some of you guys might know this, but hopefully we'll get into some areas that will clarify some issues for you and lead the rest of you into understanding a little bit more about it. Now, we know that Perl is considered a dynamic language, which means that it's interpreted at runtime. It's certainly not compiled in the sense that C or C++ are compiled. And it has what I like to call a casual relationship with variables. It is very flexible. It is very much controllable during runtime, and it sort of monitors the variables, unlike C, which C is basically just references to memory. Perl tracks all of the variables in data structures. Okay, so any type of data structure that you might use, it doesn't just keep pointers to the memory. It tracks a lot of different information about it that provides introspection and the ability to adjust at runtime how it views a variable. For example, a variable that you may be treating as a number, 1 second, depending on the context of what you're doing with it, it may then treat it as a string or a character. So remember this while we're talking, that Perl manages variables kind of like a puppet master. Okay? And I'm going to pull up something that I think everybody here should know who Rainy Urban is. He contributes a lot to Perl and some Perl-related projects. One of the cooler things that I've seen come out of him is something called Perl Guts Illustrated, and he basically maintains what the different data, how Perl sees the different data types that it manages. And I'm not going to go over all of this, but I want to show you that these structures here, let me get these bigger. These diagrams here describe all of the different pieces of information that Perl will track about even as simple as scalar. So if you assign a variable to a number or just a string, it tracks all of this stuff, okay? And these are internal data structures that the Perl interpreter itself uses, and you are not exposed to it at all, thankfully, because it's a lot of stuff. So even a simple variable that tracks a number or a string will provide all of these details and the ability, these places where you can affect how Perl uses it. So the SV, anytime you see an SV, that's a scalar value. A scalar value is a variable assigned to a number or a string or a character. It's not even a complex data structure. But you see how complicated Perl's internal representation of that is. And I'm just going to scroll through here so you can kind of get an idea of all the stuff that might be going on inside of Perl. This looks like something, so this is, just to point this out, what we have here is an array. Well, it's not just it's an array to us, but to Perl, it's all of this other stuff, okay? It tracks what other places are using the variable, a reference count. It can track, well, I don't even know because it's so complicated. One of these days, I've told myself I'm going to go through and try and understand all of this. But there are people who, like, they are truly committed to Perl. They love Perl, but they don't write Perl. They maintain the interpreter, and they're experts at the internal representation of what we do every day or what we mess with. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of really smart people who provide this Perl interpreter to us, and they're the ones that get paid to manage all this stuff. We just get paid to write easy Perl code. Okay, so that's what I wanted to kind of get across to everybody, is that the Perl concept of variable is very flexible. And I guess probably, all right, so one thing I also wanted to mention is I'm only going to be talking about 3 variable types today. Perl tracks, I think there's at least 7 variable types. Okay, we're going to be talking about simple scalars, we're going to be talking about arrays, and we're going to be talking about hashes, which are also known as associative arrays. Now, in terms of scoping is one of those things in Perl that like you really need to get your hands dirty with Perl to start understanding how the scoping comes into play. Now, what scoping is in general is as you're writing a program and you're thinking in terms of either just a big long main script or you're starting to write subroutines. Scoping has to do with the value of a variable, or even if the variable even exists, wherever you may be at your point in execution. So if you've got a script, you define a variable, your variable is currently in scope, it's visible, okay? But you may jump into a subroutine, and there you might have another variable, but that variable inside of that subroutine may only be visible within that subroutine or the scope of that subroutine, so that the subroutine can do what it needs to do, and then when you jump out of the subroutine, then that variable is basically gone. So Perl uses what is called file-based scoping, which means that all of the variables that you define, they're visible within the scope of that file. There are, next time we're going to start talking about modules and packages. There's a package scope, but it's still, at the end of the day, file-based. So when you're thinking of a Perl script and you've got your variables in that script, the primary point of reference for all of those variables is the file itself. So as you start including Perl script, you start including modules and Perl scripts, then the value of the variables, or if the variables are even visible, has to do with the modules and the files that you're including. An example where this is not the case, and I don't know the exact details of the scoping rules, but JavaScript is not file-based scoping. So it's more of an object runtime-based scoping?
Basically, everything's global unless you take great pains to make it not so.
Okay. So if you mess around with Perl and with JavaScript, the differences might be pretty apparent to you. I don't do a whole lot of JavaScript, and JavaScript I do I don't really have to worry too much about this. But in any case, my hope is that we're going to start having you guys actually write code and start seeing how scoping actually affects things, like the value of a variable, or if a variable is even available to you at a point in code. So that was just a general introduction to that. Now typing, Perl doesn't have what we would, if you're coming from C or C++ or Java, it doesn't have data types. So a data type, for example, would be an integer, with a certain number of bits, so like 32-bit integer, 64. In C, there's floats, which are decimal point numbers. There's so we don't have anything like that in Perl. Data types in Perl, when we talk about a data type in Perl, we're referring more to, is it a scalar, is it an array, is it a hash? Right? And as I mentioned before, Perl is dynamic in how it treats the variables. So a scalar, I'll jump right into this. A scalar is if you assign a single value to a variable. And I was talking about scoping. The key word that we want to use when we declare a variable in Perl is my. There's others, but that is the one that we're going to use primarily today. In C, you might use int, and then the variable, or double, or something like that. We're not doing any of that in Perl. So if we want to define a scalar, it's going to be my dollar, and then variable name equals, I'll just assign it the number 1, and then semicolon. Now what's going on here is we're declaring my, this is scoping. This is not a type. Okay? My refers to your scoping, to your file scoping. The $sign is what actually tells the Perl interpreter that it's a scalar. Okay? So I'll put that there, $sign. The equal sign is special in Perl, but in this case here, it means what you think it means. And then 1 is the value that we're assigning to var. Now you might think it's just a number, but the way that Perl actually represents values in this big data structure is it represents it as a string value or a character value, and it has a second representation as an actual number. There are modules out there. So in other words, this might look like just a single variable to you, but internally, Perl can pull a value from either what it thinks would be the number or what it thinks would be the string of the character. And there's no practical use for this in basic Perl, but there are modules out there that allow you to store two values inside of this rather than one. And that's more or less an abuse of how Perl does things. But that just goes to show you that in some situations where it thinks that you might want to use a number, for example, in math, in a mathematical expression, it'll pull the numerical value, which may be an actual integer. Or if you want to print it, say in a string, it's going to pull the string or the character representation of the value so that it can generate the string and print it to the string. Okay? So that's what's going on here. This is a scalar. All right, comment is a comment in Perl. Now this thing, this dollar sign, anything that precedes a Perl type is called a sigil. All right? S-I-G-I-L. There's a religious reference to what a sigil is. I don't know what it is, but Larry Wall is a linguist and master of words, so that's kind of what he called it. And the sigil is used for a variety of things. It's not just for scalars, but it's used more or less for a scalar context when you want to use a scalar rather than trying to dig into an actual data structure. It also helps the interpreter know as soon as it hits this dollar sign that it doesn't have to worry if this is going to be like a full set of, it can basically say, oh, I see a dollar sign. I don't have to worry about all of these cases. I can focus on these cases. So it's also a way to help the interpreter be more efficient. Okay. So this is the scalar. Now an array, in order to define an array, everybody knows what an array is. It's an ordered list of values. Okay. And in Perl, the sigil is the @ symbol. Is that an @ symbol? At. Now, I'm doing this on purpose to confuse y'all. Now, in Perl, $var and @var are not the same variable. Okay? So Perl maintains what's called a symbol table, where it tracks all of this stuff. When you define $var goes into this symbol table. It knows that it's a scalar, and as long as you don't redefine my $var, it's not going to complain. Now, when you define my @var, it sees it as a completely different variable. It throws it in the symbol table, and it's marked as an array. Okay. So these are two different variables. Now, in order to initialize an array, you do an open parens, and then you can just have a list of items, comma, separated list of items. And this is going to be maintained in order during the entire, until you start modifying the array, of course. But if you don't modify this array, it's going to be in a fixed order. Perl is also 0 indexed, meaning that this is item 0, item 1, item 2. Okay. And then the third data type is a hash. The sigil for a hash is a % sign. And what do you think I'm going to name this one? So these are all considered different variables with different data types, or instances of data types during runtime. Now, the hash is an associative array. An associative array is a key value pair. So rather than having item 1, item 2, item 3, you're having key 1, value 1, key 2, value 2, and so on. And then to initialize it, key 1, you do the open parens just like in the variable, and then you do key 1, and then this equal, greater than symbol, and then value 1. This is a string value 1. And I'll create a few more. Key 2, value 2, key 3, value 3, and then close parentheses, semicolon. Okay. Now a couple of things about this. That's a colon, that's a comma. Close parentheses, this is a semicolon. Okay. A few things about a hash. Now, in Perl lingo, this is not necessarily an assignment. Okay, this is called a fat comma, or in some cases a Texas comma. What you can actually do is I think, David, correct me if I'm wrong here. I think you can actually replace these with commas.
Yes.
And so there's nothing necessarily special to the Perl interpreter about this fat comma. Okay? It's mainly for us. So we know that conceptually this is the key and this is the value. You could literally assign an array of an even number of items, because you need pairs. You can assign an array of even number of items to a hash, and it will take the odd numbered item, but 0, starting on the left, key value, key value, key value, all day long. I don't know if any of you have ever seen during a hash assignment Perl complain about an odd number of elements. If I were to assign 1, 2, 3 to this hash, it would give me an error, because 1 would be the first key, 2 would be the first value, 3 would be the second key, but there's no value. So it would say, Perl would complain and say, I need an even number of things if you want to assign this list or this array to the hash. David, you want to say something?
Yeah, if you ever look inside foreign package account, there's a convention that we use that uses this, uses the comma, fat comma syntax. So there's a function that maps one file to a different location in the archive. The first argument is where the original file is, and the second argument is where we want it put inside the archive. And they should be separated with a comma, but we use the fat comma just to emphasize that we're mapping one thing to another. It's just to make it easier for humans to read, and the interpreter doesn't care.
And that's an excellent point. There's a lot of neat things about Perl. Perl is supposed to be written and read as an actual language, like not spoken language, but a written language. There's a lot of play on style and terms, and it makes it so it's much more of a natural process. Like you're using that natural language processing part of your brain. If you really get into Perl, Perl allows you to really leverage that rather than just say the structured or the mathematical part of your brain. There's a lot of liberal arts and English majors. Brian, I believe, has an English degree. Brian Carlson. There's a lot of language-oriented people that find themselves really into Perl, and it's because Larry Wall, the linguist, also the computer scientist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, wanted to not just make a programming language, but make a language that was much more of a natural medium in which to work. And I think Perl is really, that's why I like Perl, even though in the beginning of learning Perl, I didn't know that's why I liked Perl, but that part of it appealed to me much more than these rigidly structured languages. So, that being said, I'll put these back to the fat comma. So as David pointed out, this fat comma, it's just a comma. This is for us to see. So we're not trying to unpack the array in our head and waste brain cycles. All right. Now, that's how you define these. there's a lot more that you can do with this. There's a lot more that can go on the right-hand side of these equal signs. Okay, it doesn't have to just be a number or a string. An array doesn't have to have just numbers or strings as elements. And likewise, hashes don't have to, well, the keys have to be strings. Okay, but the value part, there's a lot of flexibility there. It doesn't have to just be a string or a number. Okay? Is it okay if I erase this? Okay. What's that called? It's the general term.
The sigil?
Yes. Okay. Good job. Oh, it's right there. Okay. That's okay. I'll teach you.
I thought if you assigned a key to a hash without a value, it would create, Perl would create index as the value. I didn't, no.
So in order, if we had my var equal to 1, 2, 3 undef, then you would get that. Like you could do.
But you would have to actually explicitly provide undef as a value
Yes.
to the hash. Interesting.
Actually, let me switch real quick because I wanna make sure I cover this. Even though it's a little slow, I want to cover these basic things. All right. Oh, by the way, this is my account on freeshell.org. I mentioned it in the HIP chat room, but if you want a Unix environment that is not related to cPanel, just for your own playing around, they provide free Unix accounts. It's NetBSD. There's also another provider for shell accounts. It's called Devious, DEVIO.US, and they provide free OpenBSD shells. And it's good. I mean, it's like a freemium model. You can get like a basic shell, but then you can pay in and get all kinds of neat features. So it's something to look into if you don't want to worry about maintaining a Linux laptop or relying on your work stuff. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is so my var equals 1, my at var equals 1, 2, 3. My var equals, let's say, key 1. Now you don't see, that's the other thing with the hashes is the key on the left hand side doesn't have to be quoted, but if you were to put a string on this side, it needs to be quoted. All right, so there's a module called Data Dumper that comes by default with any Perl installation, and it's really good for just dumping out the structure of one of these data types. It doesn't provide any introspection. There's a neat module called Develop Peak, and it actually will. Maybe I'll show the output of that here soon. Okay. Anyway, it shows you some more details. Like it shows some of the internal things that are associated with the scalar. So like it'll dump. Data Dumper will just show that as 1. Develop Peak will show this other bits of information that Perl's tracking. All right. So var1. Ignore that slash first for a while. We're not talking about that yet. Okay. So we're going to dump the structures of the 3 different variables that we just defined. Okay. So I'm going to jump over here. That's the $var. So just say var equals 1. This is the array. var2, that's the array. That's how it's just representing it. 1, 2, 3. This is the hash You see these Perl braces? We'll talk about those next time. I'm not getting into all that. So key one, okay, here's the other very important thing about hashes. This reminded me. Hashes are unordered. So while the assignment, you can assign an even size list of things to a hash, it's not ordered like a razor order. So if you were to iterate over them, then you are not guaranteed that these keys are going to be in any kind of order. An array, on the other hand, you will always hit starting from the 0 index and go all the way through sequential. Okay? A lot of bugs have been introduced, not necessarily relying, not relying on a specific order that hashes are iterated through, but assuming that it's always going to be the same order. So that's the other part. It's unordered, and you can never bank on the order in which it's going to iterate. Yes.
To be more precise, you can actually count on it being in a different order every time, and that's for security reasons.
Yes.
Ruby did that correctly from the start. Python, it took 3 tries. Perl took 3 tries. PHP still hasn't got it right.
Yeah, exactly. So, yes, good point. Assume that it's never going to be in the same order, especially the larger the keys, the definitely more that's true. Okay, where's that going with this? Let me see if develop peak is installed on here. It is. Excellent. Okay. So I'm doing this also so you guys can kind of see some like workflow with Perl. I don't know anything off the top of my head about develop peak, so I'm going to do Perl doc develop peak, and it's going to hopefully pull up. Okay. This is one of the really cool things about Perl. Most of the modules, at least the core modules and the very popular modules, come with really well-written pod. Pod is called plain old documentation. If you've ever looked at our Perl code, most of them have some kind of pod in it, and some of them have nothing. Some of them are really, really well done. Some of them are terrible. And we don't have a standard way to do them because it always causes a fight. It's very much a religious thing, just like Vim versus Emacs or what have you. Now, what I'm doing here, I just want to see how do I use it. So dump, what's easy enough. So what I'm going to do here is, so I'm dumping, using data dumper there. Actually, does it? Let me see if that works real quick. That's not the one. Okay. At some point, we're going to talk about when to use the full namespace of a package and all of that. That is just a distraction at this point. All right, so comment. This is okay. This is just so you can see better. All right, data dumper, and then devel peak. New. Okay. So.
Leave out the print statement.
What's that?
Leave out the print.
Oh, okay.
Develop peak is annoying in that it just prints to standard out no matter, or standard error no matter.
I was wondering. I was going to see what happened, but
yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Maybe not. I guess so. Okay. I was wondering. I was going to see what happened there. Okay. So let's focus on this bottom piece right here. So I did develop peak dump and then just $var. SV stands for scalar value. IV, I think that's integer value. These are some memory addresses, and I don't know what they mean. Ref count of 1. Perl knows that there's only one variable that references $var, and that's itself. Okay? Or maybe the current scope. In any case, if that were to get to 0, Perl would get rid of it. It would flush the memory, it would destroy it. Okay? Flags, it contains a number of flags. They all mean something different, and it all allows Perl to do different things. I don't know off the top of my head what those are, but those clearly are the default flags. Now, IV is equal to 1. So I think what this means is that it knows that 1 is a value. Actually, let me try something. It knows that 1 is an integer. So it's saying the integer value is 1. Remember I told you that it can kind of track 2 values? So this is where we start to play with it. Sometime I want to see what this does. Okay, so that's cool. So okay, there's no IV. Okay, so it doesn't consider that an integer value. Well, when we just had assigned it to 1, IV was 1, but now that it's a string, this.
What you can do is on one statement, assign it to 1, and then another statement, and concatenate an empty string with it, and then it'll be both.
Oh, that'll work, I think.
What if you just quoted one?
Let's quote that. Let's see what happens there. Sorry, this thing's slow. All right. So that's just quoting it. So cow is copy on write. It's a memory efficiency mechanism. So, okay, that didn't do it. But let's see. Let's do what David suggested. So 1, and then equals var dot, and I'm adding basically an empty space to it. Okay. Another way I can do this is $var equals, without using shortcuts. There are shortcuts. So this is basically creating a string out of it. But let's try the concatenation. All right, that's getting annoying. Okay. Good job. Okay. So this is what we're demonstrating here is that we assign it to just a 1. So it created this IV entry. Okay. And then what we did was we added to it an empty string, which it's not on def, it's just an empty string. It's still a string. It's still defined. Okay. And then what that did was it added this PV, and I believe that this is a null terminating character, right? Okay, so now this is the string representation of a 1 that was then added to this variable, scalar variable that Perl is trying to track. Okay, so there are modules that will allow you to directly use either this IV value of 1 or this PV value of 1. Okay, which is really 1 plus the empty string. That tells Perl I need to create an entry, a stringified representation of this value also. So, cool. See, we're going over super basic stuff, but then you get to see neat stuff like this. All right. Now I was going to look at, we'll look at the array quickly. Okay. Whoa. All right, I'm using less. It's a pager. Remember we talked about this in the Unix thing? Okay. Oh, wait. Nope. All right, I got to capture the All the channels. Okay. All right. So let me get rid of this guy here. It's kind of taking up some space.
Get rid of the other one too.
The
Not 3 words.
okay. All right. We're not going to be using this one again or this one. All right, cool. Why did I do that? Oh, okay. I'm combining the error out and standard out command line, and it's even though I'm dumping the contents first, and then whatever developing has, the shell is reversing it. So that's why this is happening. Just ignore that. Okay, this is the dump portion. We're showing how it has 3 elements, 1, 2, and 3. These are numbers. Okay, now this, I can't break this down as well or succinctly as the scalar. Then maybe David has some things to say. What I can tell you is that this header section right here defines some general things about the array itself. Okay, I don't know what all of these are, but that's what you got. Now, it looks like for each 1, 2, 3, each element in the array, there's an SV entry that gets lumped here. And if you look at it, it looks identical, well not exactly identical to the memory address, but in form it's identical to when we dump just the scalar. So what this is telling us is that we have this array, okay, and then it has an ordered list of values, 1, 2, 3, that are scalars. So arrays can have other items inside of it as a list. It can have other arrays inside of it, it can have other hashes in it, and other data types in it, Perl tracks, which we're not talking about today. So this is IB1, so that references this element. This is IB2, so that's the integer value that corresponds directly with this 2, and then 3. And then we could also do the same trick that we did before, where we append an empty string to each of those, and then it would give us that PV value, that stringified version. So that demonstrates that there's this how Perl just considers it as a collection of whatever the constituent items are. In our case, we're just assigning it to integers. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do the same thing for the hash. Okay. All right, hash is a lot longer. So at the bottom, we see that the hash is dumped just the values. And again, they're not in any particular order. Let's see. So we get most of it. So the hash, because it's meant to be a more generalized and flexible data structure, there's a lot more stuff that gets tracked from the get-go. Okay, I don't know what they are, but we can look those up at some point. And then here, so okay, this rand right here, this has something to do with the order in which it's iterated over. There's a Perl went just both feed in and fully embrace the randomization of hashes. Some cycles go maybe like 516 or earlier, whereas it was always kind of randomized. They made it really randomized, and even within the same process, if you were to like iterate the same hash over and over and over again, they wanted it to be extremely unlikely. Well, I guess as you have more keys, that it would be be very unlikely that it would iterate the same way, even in close succession. Now, there's different bits you can environmental variables you can tweak to make it either less random, so you can actually force it to iterate the keys in the same way every time, or more random. Now, I don't know why you would make it there are modules to have ordered index or ordered hashes that you can use. So there's no reason really to fiddle with that. But if there are cases where you want to iterate over a hash in a certain order, maybe insert order or same order every time, there are modules that will let you do that. So just keep that in mind. You're not completely stuck in the midst of that. Okay, so I'm just going to break this down real quick. I don't know what ELT means, but it's associated with key 1, which is one of our keys. And then there's this SV entry here with a value, which is string. So PV, pointer value, it points to this string. So this is key 1, and then this is its value string, just string. Now here we got key 3, so even develop key doesn't dump them in any kind of order. This is the key 3. Its SV is, what is it? It's just the string pi. Okay? And then we have key 2. I think I assigned just a number 1 to it. Yeah. So it's just integer value, so its entry is pretty short. So you kind of get the sense of, okay, scalar values are treated the same, more or less the same way internally by Perl, whether it's just a scalar value, it's a scalar value inside of an array, or it's a scalar value inside of a hash. Okay? And then when you start getting to your hashes, or to your arrays, there's a little bit of more information that Perl needs to know to track things. And then when you get to a hash, there's a lot of stuff that Perl needs to know to try to track things, your collection there. Okay, any questions? Is this?
Could you show it again?
Yeah.
So when we see like a backtrace, why is it helpful to show the key value hash?
What do you mean?
Can you show it again?
Yeah, it's kind of. I don't know if this is the.
Probably just needs.
It's the. What I need to do. Okay. What time, Richard? What time we need to cut this off?
Pretty soon.
Soon? Like what? 5 minutes? 5 minutes. Okay. All right. All right. Serious. There you go.
Where it says like key 1 hash equals address.
Okay, where now?
Where it lists out each element at key 3 hash equals the address. Like when we see a backtrace,
Mhm.
it always drops the hash value.
Okay.
So how is that helpful? Why is
I've never used it. Have you ever used that value?
The hash after the element? No,
That's just address.
That's actually okay. With SV equals IV, there's an address in parentheses. That's the address of the information about the variable. It's kind of like the inode versus the file.
Okay.
So
And then-
like the line above it where it says element key 1 equals hash.
Yeah, the hash is is Perl has a hashing algorithm internally that it uses. I don't know which one it is, but basically it takes the random value that I don't see where it is on that one, but it takes the random value and salts the key and then hashes that together, and that's how it arrives at that hash value. But it's really
Oh, that's right, because it randomizes. Okay, so it doesn't want to expose the key.
right.
It's at the RV at the top, the random value that it's using.
No, that's the reference value, which points to,
Ah.
yeah, notice that the address of the hash in the next line down matches that value.
Yes.
Did that help?
I was just asking if it's like helpful, like when you see the
I've never used it. Have you ever used anything like that? Trying to debug something?
Never.
It would really only be useful if you were debugging the Perl interpreter itself, like there was a seg fault or something, and you needed to know the address where it lived.
that makes sense.
Whenever I think about data structures, the module I think of all the time is data dumper simple. I was wondering if y'all use that.
I've never used it, but
So with data structures like that, like creating a hash, you can nest a hash inside the hash inside the hash. You can go way deep and you can make these giant data structures, and people do. People use them all the time. And when you're debugging them, using dumper is great, but then you have to know exactly where along the line you got to search for, and it'll just paste out and say, I mean, that takes forever. So data dumper simple just prints them all. So you can just dump the whole thing out onto your screen. And the other thing it does is it names your variables to var1, but I think like your develop peak did the same thing on that.
does that come? Is that on cPanel or it comes with like core, like dumper does?
Not core, it's cPanel. You gotta install it. Simple.
Simple.
But you got the capitalization perfect.
Wait, what?
Capitalization is right.
Okay.
Now, the team that's actually compiling the product could certainly use this information to debug an issue with the compiler.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we need to wrap it up. I'm happy to take questions after or chat or whatever, but kind of reached the red line. Next time, I'm going to talk about references and arbitrary data structures. So, and then also that'll lead into globbing. I mentioned the simple table, and then anonymous subroutines. Once we understand references, we can talk about anonymous subroutines, and then we can start like introduction to modules, and then we can start talking about package scoping and all of that stuff. So hopefully this was helpful, and it'll definitely give us a launching point to start off next time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I was also toying with the idea of having a lab where we could sit down and we could mess with things. Is that of interest? Because I know that the introduction or the intermediate Perl has a workbook, and it goes pretty in depth in dealing with variables and all of that. We may, if we had like a lunch and learn where it's really just to sit down, you kind of hack on something, and some of us walk around and answer questions. Would that be helpful? Okay, awesome. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There's a reason why I wasn't too ambitious about talking about this, because I knew that we would get into some detail. So. All right.